Okay, so you want to buy a theme park. Sure, the idea sounds exciting, and if you've already got the money, you're probably picturing roller coasters, smiling families, and a very comfortable revenue stream flowing in your direction every summer. But before you wire the deposit, here's a number you should sit with for a moment. Universal's Epic Universe in Orlando cost roughly $5 billion to build. $5 billion. And it hasn't opened yet, which means it hasn't earned a single dollar back. That's the entry price for one park in one city. And the moment those gates open, the real financial pressure begins, not ends. So if you're serious about this business, you need to understand exactly what you're buying, what it costs to keep it running, and why even smart, experienced operators get buried by parks that look profitable on the surface. Let's start with the price tag. Because just like with drilling rigs or McDonald's franchises, the range here is enormous, and the category you're buying into determines almost everything. A small indoor theme park, the kind with soft play areas, go-karts, and maybe a few simulator rides, can be built for anywhere between $10 and $30 million. That's the budget end of this market. A mid-size regional park with outdoor rides, a few roller coasters, and a water feature runs somewhere between $100 million and $500 million. And then there's the top tier, the Disney and Universal category, where a single major expansion project can cost over $1 billion on its own. The Shanghai Disneyland project came in at approximately $5.5 billion. That's not the whole company, that's one park. So where do you fit in all of this? Let's say you're not trying to compete with Disney. You've got $200 million, you found a site, and you want to build a legitimate regional theme park that can draw visitors from a radius of about 3 hours by car. That's actually a viable model, and it's the model that most independently owned parks operate on. But $200 million gets you started, not finished. Because once you've bought the land, and land in a prime tourist corridor like Central Florida can run over $1 million per acre, you still need to build everything on it. A single world-class roller coaster costs between $20 and $35 million just to design and install. One ride, and you'll need at least 5 or 6 headline attractions to give people a reason to buy a ticket in the first place. Here's how the capital typically breaks down. Roughly 30 to 40% of your budget goes directly to rides and attractions. Another 20 to 25% covers themed construction, the buildings, facades, and environmental design that make the place feel like somewhere rather than just a collection of machines in a field. Land acquisition and site preparation eat another 10 to 15%, and the rest disappears into utilities infrastructure, ticketing systems, parking, staff facilities, and the inevitable cost overruns that every large construction project produces. So that $200 million park, by the time it opens, you've probably spent closer to $240. Now you're open, and on day one, before a single guest walks through the gate, you have a fixed cost structure that runs whether you sell 10,000 tickets or 0. Labor is the biggest line item. A mid-size park with 100 rides and attractions needs somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 employees on a busy day. And labor typically accounts for 30 to 40% of total operating revenue. Ride maintenance adds another 8 to 12%. You're running electrical systems, water systems, food service equipment, and safety inspection schedules across an entire property. And a single major ride can cost anywhere from $100,000 to over $1 million a year just to maintain. Add insurance, which for an amusement park with physical rides and large crowds runs 3 to 6% of revenue. Add marketing, utilities, property taxes. Put it all together, and operating costs can run up to 70% of total revenue in a given year. This assumes operating near capacity most of the year. You've built for peak days, so a quiet Tuesday carries the same costs but 30% occupancy. Weather matters too. A rainy summer cuts attendance by 20% while fixed costs stay the same. That means your first job isn't selling tickets. It's covering an enormous fixed cost base before you see a cent of profit. And the way you cover it is by understanding that a theme park is not really in the ticket business. It's in the per capita spending business. A guest who pays $80 to walk through your gate and then spends another $60 inside on food, merchandise, and upgrades is worth twice as much as a guest who just buys the ticket and brings their own lunch. The industry tracks this obsessively. Average per capita spending at mid-size parks sits around $52 to $62 once you're inside the gate, and the most profitable operators push that number aggressively through food, retail, and upsell products. Guest satisfaction metrics track repeat visitation and word-of-mouth marketing growth. A visitor who has a great experience tells friends and families, generating more revenue than paid advertising. Top operators measure everything: wait times, food quality, staff service, cleanliness, and tie crew bonuses to performance metrics. That discipline directly impacts revenue. Here's why that matters. Food and beverage at a theme park carries gross margins of 70 to 85%. A funnel cake that costs you 60 cents to make sells for $9. A branded souvenir cup that costs $2 wholesale retails for $25. Merchandise margins are in the same range. These are not incidental revenue streams. At well-run parks, food, merchandise, and experiential add-ons contribute between 30 and 50% of total revenue, which means you're not just running a rides business, you're running a hospitality business that happens to have roller coasters attached to it. Now let's talk about how you actually price the front door, because this is where a lot of smaller operators leave money on the table. The basic model is a flat general admission ticket, and for decades, most parks charge the same price regardless of when you showed up. That model is largely dead at the top end of the industry. Disney now charges different prices for different days of the week, different times of year, and different access tiers within the same park. On a peak day at Walt Disney World, a single-day ticket can run over $200. On a slow Tuesday in January, the same ticket might cost $89. This is dynamic pricing, and studies show it can increase annual revenue by as much as 20% compared to flat-rate ticketing. For your regional park doing $30 million a year in gate revenue, that's $6 million sitting uncollected if you're not doing this. Ancillary revenue streams beyond tickets matter quite significantly. A $20 parking charge across 800,000 annual visits at 1.3 vehicles per group generates $5 million. Lockers, phone charging stations, mobile food ordering, and premium dining reservations all carry high margins and add up quickly across the year. On top of base tickets, you have fast pass systems. Disney's Lightning Lane program, the paid version of what used to be free, generates substantial incremental revenue from guests who've already bought a ticket. You're selling the same seat on the same ride twice, once in the ticket price, once again in the skip the line fee. Operators who feel uncomfortable with this approach tend to be the ones with thinner margins. Let's run the actual numbers for your $200 million regional park. Say you open at an average attendance of 800,000 visitors a year, which is realistic for a well-located regional park in its first few years. Your average ticket price, blended across peak and off-peak days, is around $55. That's $44 million in gate revenue. In-park spending adds another $40 per visitor on average, which is $32 million. Total revenue is $76 million. Your operating costs at 65% of revenue are just under $50 million. That leaves you with roughly $26 million in operating income before debt service, depreciation, and taxes. Sounds workable, but here's the problem you didn't plan for. You financed $120 million of that $200 million build with debt. At current rates, that's somewhere between $8 and $12 million a year in interest alone. Depreciation on your rides and infrastructure adds another $10 to $15 million annually as an accounting cost. Your net profit after everything is somewhere between $5 and $10 million on $200 million invested. That's a return of 2.5% to 5%. A treasury bond pays more than that with significantly less stress and no roller coasters to maintain. One often overlooked burden is ongoing capital reinvestment. A mature park must refresh 1 or 2 major attractions annually at costs between $15 and $50 million. You cannot pocket this as profit. It's mandatory spending to stay competitive. Parks that underinvest typically see attendance decline as guests migrate to competitors with newer experiences. This is the core paradox of theme park economics. The bigger the investment, the harder it is to generate a competitive return. Indoor parks, which cost $10 to $30 million to build, can generate cash flow of $3 to $10 million a year, which puts their return on invested capital in the mid-teens to over 20%. That's a good business. A billion-dollar regional park with $100 million in annual EBITDA looks impressive until you account for the capital that created it. And a $5 billion resort development like Epic Universe would need to generate $500 million or more in annual operating income just to justify the investment at any standard rate of return. Disney can do that. You probably cannot. Now here's where attendance volatility comes in, and this is the part of the business that should keep you up at night. A theme park's fixed cost base doesn't shrink when attendance drops. If a bad summer, a recession, or a pandemic cuts your attendance by 30%, your revenue drops by 30%, but your costs barely move. You still pay the same insurance premiums, the same debt service, the same base payroll, the same maintenance schedule. In 2020, most theme parks in the world went to zero revenue for months while their fixed costs kept running. Six Flags lost over $500 million that year. SeaWorld posted a net loss of over $200 million. Cedar Fair nearly violated its debt covenants. These are professional operators with decades of experience. None of teeth. Were prepared for the duration of the shutdown. And even outside of once-in-a-generation events, attendance at regional parks has been under structural pressure for years. Competition isn't just the park across town. It's every entertainment option that exists on a smartphone. The younger the demographic you're chasing, the harder it is to pull them away from something they can do at home for free. Parks have responded by adding concerts, seasonal events, immersive experiences, and elaborate holiday overlays that convert the same physical space into a different product 3 or 4 times a year. Halloween events at parks like Knott's Berry Farm or Kings Island generate revenue in October that rivals peak summer weekends. That's not accident, that's survival math. If you own a hotel on the same property as your park, the economics shift somewhat in your favor. On-site hotels at major parks command a premium of 30 to 60% over comparable off-site hotels, purely because of the perceived convenience and the brand association. Disney's resort hotels routinely run at occupancy rates above 80% even when the broader Orlando market is softer. And a hotel guest spends more in the park than a day tripper. They stay longer, eat more meals, buy more merchandise, and are more likely to purchase add-on experiences because they're already fully committed to the trip. The integrated resort model, park plus hotel plus dining plus retail, is genuinely more profitable per dollar of capital than a standalone park. But it also requires dramatically more capital to build in the first place. You should also understand the role of intellectual property in this business, because it's the single biggest variable separating Disney and Universal from everyone else. Disney spent over $1 billion building Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge at its California and Florida parks. The return wasn't just in ticket sales. It was in merchandise, themed dining, multi-day visits, hotel stays, and price elasticity. Guests who came specifically for Star Wars paid more for everything and came back. The IP created a reason to raise prices across the entire resort, not just in the Star Wars land. Universal did the same thing with Harry Potter, transforming a struggling park into one of the highest-grossing entertainment properties in the world. Without recognizable IP, a regional park is competing purely on ride quality and location. With the right IP, it can charge $150 a ticket and still have a wait list. The global theme park market was valued at $69 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach nearly $140 billion by 2034. The top 4% of parks by scale generate 60% of global revenue. Disney's Parks division posted $10 billion in operating income in fiscal 2025, an all-time record. Those numbers make the business look like a guaranteed winner, but they're describing the outcome for operators who've spent decades and tens of billions building an ecosystem that a new entrant cannot replicate by writing a check. For the record, the industry median net profit margin for an established park operating at stable attendance is around 15% according to IAAPA's 2025 data. Major parks with strong IP and pricing power can hit EBITDA margins of 25 to 40%. Small parks average 8 to 15. Those are acceptable margins in a normal capital-light business. In a business where you've spent $200 million before you sold a single ticket, they require decades of patient operation before the investment even breaks even. So if you're planning to open your park next year and watch the revenue roll in, you should probably reconsider. The same $200 million invested in Disney stock over the past 2 decades would have grown by roughly 700%. No maintenance schedules, no insurance claims, no roller coaster inspections at 2 in the morning. But if you're still convinced this is the business you want to be in, pick your category carefully. Keep the capital structure lean. Price aggressively and make absolutely sure you have a plan for the winter.